Elder Vexthul had witnessed the rise and fall of 17 galactic civilizations. He'd seen species transcend their physical forms, others collapse into digital singularities, and a few particularly memorable ones spontaneously combust from pure intellectual achievement. In his 50 million years of existence, he thought he'd seen everything. He was wrong. What is that thing? Scholar Nimwalk whispered, his three eyes blinking in sequence as they stared at the primitive vessel drifting through their sacred space. The object before them defied all known protocols of interstellar travel. It was barely held together with what appeared to be metallic tape, covered in crude drawings of anatomically impossible creatures, and bore the words Earth rules. Proxima Centauri drools, spray painted across its hull in 17 different colors. I believe, Elder Vexthul said slowly, adjusting his ceremonial robes of cosmic wisdom, this is humanity's first attempt at interstellar contact. The Keltharian High Council had prepared for this moment for millennia. They'd composed 17,000 pages of greeting protocols, designed elaborate welcome ceremonies, and even learned to modulate their telepathic frequencies to accommodate primitive brain patterns. They were ready to guide another species into the light of galactic civilization with the dignity befitting the galaxy's eldest race. Then the probe started playing death metal, greetings from Earth, blasted from speakers that seemed to be duct-taped to the vessel's exterior. If you're hearing this, congratulations. You've just encountered the most awesome species in the galaxy. With Protocol Officer Kel Noth fainted immediately. The sound was followed by what could only be described as organized noise featuring someone screaming about breaking the chains of conformity, while instruments that sounded like dying mechanical beasts wailed in the background. Elder Vexthul, who had meditated in the silence of deep space for entire millennia, felt his left eye develop a twitch. Perhaps, Scholar Nimwalk suggested hopefully, this is some form of advanced mathematical communication. That's when the glitter bombs started launching. Apparently, humanity had decided that the appropriate response to encountering alien life was to cover them in sparkly, reflective particles. The ancient Keltharian flagship, a vessel of incomparable dignity that had served as a mobile monastery for 47 million years, it was now bedazzled like a teenager's school project. Sir, Communications Officer Tyle-Rek reported, picking glitter out of his respiratory filters, the probe is asking if we want to hear Earth's greatest hits. Absolutely not, Elder Vexthul replied. The probe ignored him and began playing what sounded like someone had trapped a cat in a synthesizer, followed by a human voice explaining that they would never give them up, but never let them down, and never run around and desert them. Sir, Tyle-Rek continued, now entirely covered in gold sparkles, I think we've been rickrolled. Elder Vexthul didn't know what that meant, but he was fairly certain it violated at least 47 galactic peace treaties. Part 2, Cultural Assessment Committee. The humans, Scholar Nimwalk announced to the emergency session of the Cultural Assessment Committee, are either geniuses or completely insane. I'm leaning toward both. The committee had spent 3 standard galactic months analyzing every piece of human media they could intercept. The results were concerning. Let me understand this correctly, said committee member Zix Mel, consulting her notes with obvious confusion. They created something called reality television, where they voluntarily humiliate themselves for entertainment, and this is considered one of their major cultural achievements. It gets worse, Nimwalk replied, pulling up a holographic display. They also have something called social media, where they share pictures of their food and argue with strangers about the shape of their planet. Protocol Officer Kel Noth, who had recovered from his earlier fainting spell but developed a stress-induced rash, raised a trembling appendage. Please tell me you're joking about the planet-shaped thing. PQ. Bye. I wish I was. Apparently some humans believe their world is flat, despite having achieved space travel. They call these individuals flat earthers, and they have conventions. The committee sat in stunned silence. As the galaxy's oldest civilization, the Keltharians had seen species struggle with basic concepts like fire or the wheel. But they'd never encountered a species that could split atoms while simultaneously arguing about basic geometry. However, Zix Mel interjected, her tone brightening. They also created something called memes, which appear to be a form of rapid cultural evolution through humor. It's actually quite sophisticated when you analyze the underlying social mechanics. She projected images of cats with poorly spelled captions and humans making exaggerated facial expressions over text. See, they take complex social situations and reduce them to easily digestible visual metaphors that spread exponentially through their population. It's brilliant, really. Kelnoth's rash spread to his neck. They're communicating through pictures of domestic animals. Among other things, yes. But here's where it gets interesting, Nimwalk continued, clearly warming to his subject. They simultaneously produce works of incredible artistic and intellectual depth. This Shakespeare individual created literature that explores the fundamental nature of existence, while this Einstein fellow revolutionized their understanding of space and time. And yet, Zixmel added, they also made something called Sharknado, where atmospheric disturbances contain predatory fish. The committee spent the next several hours reviewing human achievements. The Great Wall of China, impressive engineering, the internet, revolutionary communication technology, something called TikTok, potentially a form of mass hypnosis that made humans dance in synchronized patterns. Their military history is particularly fascinating, Nimwalk noted. They fought wars over everything from religious differences to the correct way to prepare tea. One conflict apparently started because someone threw pastries. The War of Jenkins' Ear. Zixmel added helpfully, though that was actually about maritime trading rights. They named a war after someone's ear. Apparently. By the end of their analysis, the committee was more confused than when they'd started. Humans were clearly capable of incredible intellectual and artistic achievements, yet they also spent considerable time watching videos of small animals doing amusing things. My preliminary assessment, Nimwalk concluded, is that humans represent either the most advanced form of organized chaos in the galaxy, or they're all completely mad and we should avoid them entirely. Sir, Tile-Rek interrupted, materializing through the chamber's communication portal. The human probe is now broadcasting something called Baby Shark on repeat. Our meditation masters are requesting permission to destroy it. Elder Vex Thul, who had been listening to the proceedings with growing fascination, made a decision that would change the course of galactic history. To prepare the tests of worthiness, he announced, we're going to find out exactly what these humans are made of. The committee exchanged worried glances. The last species to take the tests of worthiness had been the Zephyrians, and they'd created a small black hole trying to solve the puzzle of infinite contemplation. Sir, Kelnoth ventured, are you sure that's wise? What if they break something important? Elder Vexthal's ancient eyes gleamed with something that might have been amusement. My dear Kelnoth, I have a feeling that's exactly what they're going to do. Part 3. The Test of Worthiness. The sacred chamber of trials had been designed by the greatest Keltharian philosophers over the course of 3 million years. It was a masterpiece of spiritual architecture, where each puzzle required deep meditation, careful analysis of ancient wisdom, and profound understanding of the universe's fundamental truths. Captain Jake Morrison took one look at it and said, "Cool escape room, bro." Elder Vex Thul felt his eye twitch return with a vengeance. Captain Morrison, he began formally, these are the tests of worthiness, sacred trials that have challenged the greatest minds in galactic history. They are designed to. Yeah, tests. Got it, Jake interrupted, already poking at a glowing crystal that had taken the Zeltharian Empire 4 centuries to properly activate. Hey, this thing's got USB ports. Sweet. Behind him, his crew was busy taking selfies with ancient artifacts that were older than human civilization. Chief Engineer Rosa Martinez had somehow found the chamber's Wi-Fi password and was live-streaming the entire experience to Earth with the caption about to ace some alien homework. The first trial, Elder Vexthal continued, fighting to maintain his dignity, is the labyrinth of infinite contemplation. Seekers must navigate its passages while pondering the fundamental nature of existence. The average completion time is 47 years. Nah, I can see the exit from here, Jake replied, squinting across the massive maze. Rosa, toss me that grappling hook. Captain Morrison, you cannot simply bypass the labyrinth. The journey itself is... Challenge accepted. Jake called out, already swinging across centuries of carefully designed spiritual obstacles like some kind of deranged space pirate. He landed near the exit, brushed dust off his uniform, and turned back to wave. What's next? Scholar Nimwok, who had been monitoring the trials, leaned over to Elder Vex Thul. Sir, he just solved the labyrinth of infinite contemplation in 4 minutes using a piece of earth rope and completely ignoring its intended purpose. I can see that. Nimwok. The second trial was the Chamber of Cosmic Equations, where seekers had to solve mathematical proofs that described the universe's underlying structure. The Keltharians had developed these equations over millions of years of careful observation and meditation. Jake stared at the glowing symbols for about 30 seconds, then turned to his science officer. Hey, Lieutenant Park, doesn't this look like that thing from your quantum mechanics class? Oh yeah, Park replied, pulling out what appeared to be a primitive computing device. This is just a modified Schrödinger equation. Give me a sec. She started tapping the device rapidly. There we go. Answers 42. The ancient chamber lit up with approval. Every Keltharian present felt their understanding of mathematics shift slightly. How did she begin Nimwok? I have no idea, Elder Vex Thul replied. The third trial was the test of infinite patience, where seekers had to sit motionless for 1,000 days while contemplating the meaning of stillness. Jake lasted approximately 17 seconds before getting bored and starting to juggle pieces of the ancient meditation crystals. Somehow, his juggling pattern activated the chamber's completion sequence. This is impossible, Protocol Officer Kelnoth whispered, his rash now covering most of his body. These trials were designed to take decades. They'd been here for 6 hours and completed challenges that should require lifetimes of preparation. Sir, Rosa Martinez called out, having apparently hacked into the chamber's ancient computer systems, your trial software has a bunch of back doors. Pretty sloppy coding, honestly. You want me to patch them for you? Elder Vex Thul stared at the human engineer, who was casually offering to improve systems that had been perfected over geological time periods. You can modify our sacred trials? Oh yeah, easy. Your security's basically non-existent. I could probably reprogram this whole thing to play Tetris. I want me to? Please don't, Kelnoth begged. The final trial was the ultimate question of existence, a philosophical challenge that had stumped the galaxy's greatest thinkers for millions of years. The question appeared in blazing letters across the chamber wall. What is the purpose of consciousness in an infinite universe? Jake read it, shrugged, and said, to have a good time and help your friends do the same. The chamber exploded with light. Ancient mechanisms that hadn't moved in eons began spinning. The walls displayed symbols that no Keltharian had ever seen before. What's happening? Nimwok shouted over the noise. Elder Vex Thul, staring at the cosmic display with growing amazement, whispered, I think he got it right. The trial's chamber, designed to challenge species with their most profound questions, it had been casually conquered by humans who treated the whole thing like an elaborate video game. They'd solved million-year-old puzzles through creative problem-solving, ignored intended solutions in favor of more efficient approaches, and answered the ultimate philosophical question with the kind of simple wisdom that only came from a species that had learned to find joy in chaos. Sir, Jake said, walking up to Elder Vex Thul with a grin. That was fun. Got any more? The ancient Keltharian looked at this young human who had just revolutionized his understanding of wisdom itself and felt something he hadn't experienced in millions of years. He started laughing. Part 4. The Philosophy Exchange. Tell me, Captain Morrison, Elder Vex Thul said, settling into his meditation pose, what does your species believe about the nature of existence? They were sitting in the grand chamber of philosophical discourse, a sacred space where the greatest minds of the galaxy had debated the universe's deepest questions for eons. Jake was sprawled in what could generously be called a sitting position, eating something called space jerky from his emergency rations. Well, Jake said, chewing thoughtfully. My dad always said life's like a box of chocolates. You never know what you're going to get, but it's probably going to be pretty sweet. Elder Vexthul blinked all three of his eyes in sequence. That's actually quite profound. The randomness of existence combined with an optimistic outlook despite uncertainty. Your father was clearly a wise philosopher. Nah, he got that from a movie. Tom Hanks said it, great actor. Made a film where he talked to a volleyball for 2 hours and somehow made it compelling. He conversed with sports equipment? Yeah, Wilson. Tragic story, really. Anyway, what about you guys? What's your take on the whole existence thing? Elder Vexthul straightened, preparing to share wisdom accumulated over millions of years. We believe that consciousness is the universe's way of understanding itself. Through careful meditation and contemplation, we seek to comprehend our place in the cosmic order and achieve harmony with the fundamental forces of reality. Jake nodded. So you're basically saying the universe is trying to figure itself out, and we're like its thoughts. Yes, that's essentially correct. Though it's taken us millennia to reach that understanding through rigorous philosophical study. Makes sense. We've got a saying, we are the universe experiencing itself subjectively. Some dude named Bill said it. Pretty trippy when you think about it. Elder Vexthul felt his worldview shift slightly. This Bill was obviously a great thinker. Actually, he was a stand-up comedian and he did a lot of drugs. But yeah, pretty smart guy. The ancient Keltharian was beginning to realize that humans had accidentally stumbled onto profound truths while actively trying not to think too hard about anything. What about death? Elder Vexthul asked. How does your species view mortality? Jake's expression grew thoughtful. Death's just the next adventure, right? I mean, nobody knows what comes after. But that's what makes it interesting. My grandmother used to say dying was just like going to sleep, except you don't have to wake up for work the next day. Your grandmother sounds wise. She was pretty cool. Made the best cookies in 3 counties and could drink most sailors under the table. She also said that worrying about death was like worrying about what you were doing before you were born, pointless and kind of silly. Elder Vexthul had spent approximately 4 million years contemplating mortality and the nature of consciousness beyond physical existence. This human had just summarized the essence of accepting death's mystery in 2 sentences learned from a cookie-baking grandmother. Captain Morrison, he said slowly, your species has a remarkable ability to find wisdom in everyday experiences. Yeah, well, most of the important stuff is pretty simple when you get down to it. Be nice to people. Don't be a jerk. Try to leave things better than you found them. Everything else is just details. And how do you find meaning in an apparently meaningless cosmos? Jake gestured around with his space jerky. Who says it's meaningless? Look at all this cool stuff. We've got planets and stars and weird alien dudes to hang out with. Just because we can't figure out why it's all here doesn't mean it's not awesome. But without understanding the ultimate purpose, maybe there isn't one. Jake interrupted. Maybe that's the point. We get to decide what matters to us. I think that's pretty neat, actually. Means every choice we make actually counts for something. Elder Vexthul sat in silence for several minutes, processing this perspective. The idea that meaning could be self-determined rather than cosmically prescribed was revolutionary to a species that had spent eons searching for universal truth. You know, Jake continued, there's this thing we wrote on a bathroom wall back on Earth. Life's a garden, dig it. Sounds stupid. But when you think about it, it's saying you've got to put in work to make beautiful things grow, and you might as well enjoy getting your hands dirty. Bathroom wall philosophy? Best kind. People are honest when they're taking a dump. No pretense, you know. Elder Vexthul found himself genuinely laughing again. Here was a species that discovered profound truths in the most mundane places and treated the deepest questions of existence like casual conversation topics. Captain Morrison, he said finally, I believe your species may have achieved something we've been seeking for 50 million years. What's that? You've learned how to be wise without taking yourselves too seriously. Jake grinned. Well, Life's too short to be serious all the time. Besides, if you can't laugh at the universe, what's the point of being conscious? In that moment, Elder Vexthul realized that humanity hadn't just passed their tests, they'd been teaching the Keltharians something far more valuable than they'd ever expected to learn. Part 5, The Great Revelation. Young scientist Tyle Rek burst into the High Council chamber with the kind of excitement that made Protocol Officer Kelnoth's rash spread to previously unaffected body parts. Elder Vexthul, she called out, clutching a datapad and vibrating with discovery. I figured it out. I know why the humans seem so familiar. The assembled council turned their attention to her with the patient expressions of beings who had witnessed countless scientific revelations over millions of years. They were expecting another minor insight about human biology, or perhaps an interesting observation about their social structures. They were not prepared for their entire civilization to have an existential crisis. I've been analyzing human behavioral patterns and comparing them to our historical archives, Tyle Rek continued, projecting holographic displays around the chamber. Look at this data from our species development 49 million years ago. The holograms showed ancient Keltharians engaged in what could only be described as barely controlled chaos. They were building things with whatever materials were handy, solving problems through creative improvisation, and appearing to have entirely too much fun while doing it. This can't be right, Scholar Ninwalk protested. Our ancient ancestors were wise and contemplative. Were they, though? Tyle Rek challenged, pulling up more historical data. Look at this archaeological evidence. The Great Pyramid of Kelthara wasn't built as a monument to cosmic wisdom. It was built because someone bet they couldn't stack rocks higher than the Zixnaxi Mountains. The council stared in horror at documentation showing their revered ancestors engaging in what appeared to be ancient pranks, unnecessary competitions, and at least one incident involving the deliberate creation of what humans would later call fireworks just to see what would happen. The sacred texts of infinite wisdom, Tyle Rek continued ruthlessly, were originally graffiti carved into bathroom walls. Kelnoth made a sound like a deflating balloon and collapsed into his chair. But how did we become so dignified? Nimwalk asked weakly. Evolution, Tyle Rek replied. Over millions of years we selected for increasingly serious, contemplative behavior. We bred the chaos out of ourselves. We became so focused on wisdom and dignity that we forgot how to have fun. She projected side-by-side comparisons of human and ancient Keltharian problem-solving approaches. The similarities were undeniable. Both species attacked challenges with creative improvisation. Both found humor in adversity, and both had an inexplicable tendency to use whatever was handy, rather than the proper tools. The humans aren't primitive, Tyle Rek announced. They're us. They're what we used to be before we became so sophisticated that we forgot how to live. Elder Vexthul, who had been listening with growing amazement, began to chuckle. The chuckle became a laugh. The laugh became the kind of deep, belly-shaking guffaw that he hadn't experienced since his species had learned to modulate their emotional responses for maximum philosophical efficiency. Of course, he wheezed between fits of laughter. Of course they are. Look at them. They duct tape their way through impossible problems, find wisdom in the most ridiculous places, and treat every challenge like it's the setup for a joke. Sir, Kelnoth ventured nervously, what are you saying? I'm saying, Elder Vexthul replied, wiping tears from his eyes, that we've spent 50 million years evolving into the galaxy's most boring species, and these magnificent lunatics just reminded us what we gave up. The revelation spread through Keltharian society like wildfire. Ancient archives were re-examined, revealing generation after generation of increasingly stuffy ancestors who had gradually regulated the joy out of their civilization. What they had called evolution was actually a slow process of forgetting how to be spontaneous. Sir, Tyle Rek said quietly, there's more. I've been monitoring human communications, and they've started something called the Keltharian Appreciation Society. They think we're cool. She projected images of humans wearing makeshift robes and attempting to meditate, accompanied by captions like trying to be as wise as our alien space grandparents. And these guys have been doing philosophy since before Earth had dinosaurs, and they're still chill about it. They think we're their space grandparents, Nimwalk asked. Tay, apparently. And they've decided we need to loosen up and have some fun, because nobody should be that serious for 50 million years. Elder Vex Thul looked around at his fellow council members, all of whom were staring at the evidence of their species' forgotten youth with expressions of dawning understanding. My friends, he said softly, I believe we've just learned something more valuable than all our accumulated wisdom combined. What's that? Kelnoth asked. That growing up doesn't have to mean growing boring. The Great Council of the Keltharian Empire, the most ancient and dignified governing body in galactic history, unanimously voted to establish the Department of Recovered Fun and appointed Captain Jake Morrison as their first consultant. The galaxy would never be the same. Part 6. Welcome to the family. The Galactic Council meeting was supposed to be a routine diplomatic introduction. The Keltharians would present humanity as a newly contacted species, go through the standard protocols, and everyone would file the appropriate paperwork. Instead, Elder Vex Thul stood before the assembled representatives of 47 galactic civilizations wearing what appeared to be a baseball cap that read World's Okayest Space Grandpa, and grinning like he'd just discovered the secret to eternal happiness. Esteemed colleagues, he began, and several ambassadors immediately noticed something was very wrong with the usually somber Keltharian elder. I present to you humanity, but the most important species discovery in galactic history. The crystalline hegemony's representative, a being of pure logic and order, flickered with confusion. Elder Vex Thul, your species has discovered hundreds of civilizations over the millennia. What makes this one? They taught us how to laugh, Vex Thul interrupted, and the entire council chamber fell silent. Behind him, Captain Jake Morrison gave a casual wave to the assembled dignitaries, completely unfazed by being in the presence of the galaxy's most powerful beings. Hey everyone. Nice place you got here. Very spacey. The hegemony representative dimmed several shades. Did he just describe the Grand Council chamber as spacey? He did, Vex Thul replied proudly. And he's not wrong. It is quite spacey. We never thought to describe it that way because we were too busy being dignified to state the obvious. He activated a holographic display showing various scenes of Keltharian society over the past few months. Ancient meditation masters were seen learning something called stand-up comedy. Scholars were participating in activities labeled fun runs and karaoke nights. The sacred temple of infinite contemplation had been converted into what humans called a community center and was hosting bingo tournaments. The humans, Vex Thul continued, have reminded us that wisdom without joy is just complicated sadness. They've shown us that being advanced doesn't mean being boring. They are, in essence, our younger selves, and we formally adopt them as family. The Robotic Confederation's spokesperson, a perfectly logical machine intelligence, processed this information with visible confusion. Elder Vex Thul, you cannot simply adopt an entire species because they amuse you. Watch us, Vex Thul replied cheerfully. We're implementing the Galactic Chaos Preservation Act. Any species attempting to civilize humanity will answer to us. These beautiful disasters are under Keltharian protection. Jake leaned over to the nearest microphone. Thanks, Gramps. That's really sweet of you guys. Several ambassadors fainted at the casual address of the galaxy's most ancient being as Gramps. Furthermore, Vex Thul announced, clearly enjoying himself, Captain Morrison has accepted the position of ambassador to the Keltharian Empire with the official title of professional reality checker. His job is to point out when we're taking ourselves too seriously. Which is most of the time, Jake added helpfully, you guys really need to get out more. The telepathic consortium's representative, a being of pure mental energy, radiated distress. This is highly irregular. The humans display none of the characteristics we associate with advanced civilization. They're chaotic, irreverent, and apparently communicate through moving pictures of small animals. Frames, Jake corrected. And they're art, basically. Here, check this out. He projected an image of a cat wearing sunglasses with the caption, "Deal with it." See? That's the entire human philosophy right there. Sometimes life gets weird, so you put on sunglasses and roll with it. Elder Vexthul nodded sagely, profound in its simplicity. We've spent millennia contemplating the nature of acceptance, and they condensed it into a picture of a cat. The meeting devolved into chaos as various species tried to understand how the galaxy's oldest civilization had apparently been conquered by beings who weaponized glitter and considered bathroom wall philosophy a legitimate source of wisdom. Order. Order, called the council moderator, a dignified member of the bureaucratic alliance. Elder Vexthul, surely you cannot expect the galactic community to. To what? Vexthul interrupted. To remember that existence is supposed to be enjoyable? To recall that solving problems creatively is more valuable than following proper procedures? To acknowledge that sometimes the best wisdom comes from the most unexpected places? He gestured to Jake, who was now taking selfies with various alien dignitaries. This young human and his species have accomplished more in the past few months than we achieved in the past million years. They've taught us to question our assumptions, find joy in discovery, and remember that being wise doesn't mean being miserable. Plus, Jake added, we make really good pizza. You guys should try it sometime. I bet even space crystals would love pepperoni. The crystalline hegemony representative flickered with what might have been curiosity. What is pizza? Oh, buddy, Jake grinned. Do I have some life-changing news for you? And so humanity was welcomed into the galactic community, not as primitive newcomers to be educated, but as the chaotic younger siblings everyone secretly wished they could be. The Keltharians proudly introduced them at every opportunity as the species that taught us how to laugh again, and much to the horror of more traditional civilizations. Elder Vexthul retired to Earth 6 months later to pursue his dream of becoming a stand-up comedian. His opening joke, "I'd been waiting 50 million years for the right moment to tell this story," became legendary across 3 star systems. Captain Jake Morrison, meanwhile, settled into his role as professional reality checker with enthusiasm, though he never did convince the Keltharians to install a hot dog stand in the sacred temple of infinite contemplation. Some traditions, it turned out, were worth preserving, even if they did serve surprisingly good pizza at the weekly bingo games.